The story of Mansfield's role in the Underground Railroad begins long before our town and 4,000 miles away in Africa. By the time that Mansfield was founded, culture had been thriving in West Africa for almost 600 years. For 300 years, Europeans had been stealing men and women from Africa to be used as slaves. Loaded into ships and sent to the New World, they followed much the same course across the ocean that hurricanes use today. Before Mansfield was founded, more people arrived on American shores from Africa than from anywhere else in the world, and all of them in chains. They were sold like livestock, they labored in the fields for no pay, and were treated often enough inhumanly and with cruelty. When Mansfield was founded, slavery had been on this continent for nearly 200 years, and a quarter of the people in the United States were considered the property of someone else. Africans in America didn't even own their own skin, and it's no wonder that so many of them wanted to run away, which is, of course, the one thing that they weren't allowed to do, which is why the Underground Railroad came into being. It wasn't underground, and it wasn't a railroad. Though they used words that had to do with trains, the Underground Railroad was a secret network of people who worked together to help runaway slaves make their way from slavery to freedom, which meant from the South to the North. Slavery was outlawed in the North after the Revolutionary War, and Ohio was the first state that never had slavery. Once a slave crossed the Ohio River, he was relatively safe until 1850 with the enactment of the Fugitive Slave Law. After that, the law said it was illegal to help fugitive slaves in any way, or a person could spend 6 months in jail and pay a $1,000 fine. Southern slave owners offered substantial rewards for the capture of their escaped property, and thousands of men made their living tracking the runaways because it was so profitable. The rewards were far greater if refugees were caught north of the Ohio River, and so these bounty hunters were ruthless and unrelenting all the way to Lake Erie and Canada. If you were a runaway slave, you faced 1,000 terrors in the unknown countryside and in your own mind. You could follow the railroads if they ran north, or follow a river to keep off the roads. You traveled alone, or in pairs, or in a group. You move under the cover of night. You help each other as much as you can, and you pray that whenever you get where you're going, that those waiting for you are friends. Without some kind of help, it was almost unthinkable. Once they crossed the Ohio River, there was a whole network of conductors who could move them north from station to station, and since we're 180 miles from the river, most runaways were brought here by other conductors. The station masters were clustered like a constellation, close enough to be of help to each other when trouble came. And of 7 known stations, there are 5 still standing in the proximity of Lexington Spring Mill Road. The most easily recognized station is just north of Hanley Road that once was the settlement of James Gass. Along with his brother Benjamin, he would receive fugitives from conductors in Mount Gilead, keep them for a day or so, and then move them on north to Norwalk. His brother Benjamin Gass lived where the Richland B&O bike trail meets Lexington Spring Mill Road, recognized by 2 giant spruce trees. They had a neighbor named Samuel McClure. His home was surrounded by fields back then, but today it is seen on Gass Road below the Clear Fork Dam. The greatest traffic of runaways came in late summer, and fugitives could wait right out in the middle of his fields, hidden by standing corn. Today those fields are under the water of the Clear Fork Lake. He had a neighbor, James Woods, who lived on the outskirts of the little village of Millsboro. In times of danger when bounty hunters were in the area, he would instruct the fugitives to follow the stream off his property, walking right in the shallow water so dogs couldn't pick up their scent. The stream led to a cave in Millsboro where they could wait for rescue. The cave is gone today, blasted closed about 70 years ago. A conductor who might pick them up at the cave was Joseph Rowe, who had a farm west of Ontario by Route 314. He often helped his cohorts by volunteering to help bounty hunters search for slaves, and then earnestly leading them off in the wrong direction. He used to hide runaways inside standing sheaves of corn. All of these men were farmers and used that to their advantage. They all had barns. The barn of Jacob Barr can still be seen today from Route 309 near Home Road. A barn could have trap doors and concealed compartments, and lots of places you just didn't want to walk. Hiding places could be carved out of the mountains of hay, and it was in this way that fugitives could be transported right out in broad daylight. Joseph Rowe once sent a runaway north hidden in a wagon load of flour. When he got to Oberlin, he sold the flour and made a $2 profit. When you left the countryside and went into town, everything was more exposed. Mansfield had 10,000 people then, and it was a town that was divided over the question of slavery. The Presbyterian Church actually split in two over the issue. John Finney once rolled right through the square with a black man hidden under a load of pumpkins that fell off when he hit a rut in the road, exposing his real cargo to some passing women. As he replaced the load, the women helped him without saying a word. There was a man on the square whose underground activities were even more out in the open, at the offices of the Mansfield Herald. Matthias Day was a prominent businessman who went on to found Daytona Beach, Florida. His home was right in the center of town, so he kept a barn for runaways north of town where they could see slave hunters coming from far off. As a stockholder in the railroad, Matthias Day was able to arrange passage for fugitives on the night trains north, all the way to Sandusky, which was a shipping port to Canada and freedom. They rode the trains not as passengers, but shipped as freight in barrels or stretched out in a coffin. The iron rails were of great service to the Underground Railroad as an easy route to follow through strange territory, and that's how Isaac Pleasance was able to assist fugitives. He was a free black man who lived on the edge of town next to the tracks where his house was easy to find. He made his living as a barber in Mansfield and was so respected by the Presbyterian Church that they never suspected his other activities. His safe house station of the Underground Railroad was on East 4th Street in what became the Industrial District in the shadow of Westinghouse. There was another famous station in the country north of Ontario that is now one of the busiest intersections around. It was the farm of John Finney, whose exploits of 150 years ago are well documented today. The story is told of when a posse of bounty hunters showed up looking for a group of travelers that he had hidden in his barn. To stall for time, he demanded a search warrant, which they sent for. And then, to distract the men while they waited for the warrant, he invited them to dinner. His wife put up an excellent meal, but before they ate, he asked them to pray. As soon as the men's heads were bowed, he signaled to the barn, and then he prayed, and prayed, and prayed. They say he prayed for 40 minutes, and then he passed around his Bible and had each man read from the longest psalm in the book. Apparently his prayers were answered, because by the time the search warrant arrived, the fugitive slaves were long gone and well on their way towards the North Star.
When the sun goes